G'day, I'm Shane Broad and welcome to another episode of the BroadCast. Now, today I'd really like to talk about something that is a massive issue in the state, and it's something that I also find the most stressful in terms of this job, and that is housing. Way too often I have people contact my office about their housing situation, and often it is desperate. We're talking about people who are homeless or on the verge of being homeless, people with kids. We've got women fleeing domestic violence. It is just really awful. Only just today I've been contacted by another person who's about to lose their rental, and there are very little options. It's very hard to find a rental here on the Northwest Coast. It's very hard to find a rental in Tasmania. And the problem is because there's simply not enough houses. This is a massive, massive policy challenge. But last election I went to a policy. I developed a policy, took it to the election, probably didn't get the attention that I would have hoped. So today I'm here to talk with my man, Toby Green, about the policy so he can I suppose, keep me on track and make sure I don't rant enough. So my man Toby, as the joke around the office is Toby Green's the only Green that I like talking to. But Toby's here to keep me on the straight and narrow. So say g'day, Toby.
G'day, listeners. I suppose I'm here to ask questions because I've got questions myself that I don't know the answer to, and I'm hoping that you know the answers or you can at least give me a little bit of advice.
One really good thing about Toby is, he probably doesn't. He's not a keen follower of politics, and so the questions that he'll probably fire at me are ones that people out there who also don't follow politics are probably interested to know as well. So that'll definitely keep me on track. But we've got a big problem in Tasmania, and that's around housing. There's been a shortage of housing for a long, long time. And that's not just at any one part of the housing market. We've got problems with social housing, we've got problems with affordable housing, and we've even got problems at the top end. So I can go through and talk about problems in each of those, if you like. So we'll probably talk about the issues that people have in social housing, and that is there's simply not enough social houses. So this is the old, I suppose you'd call housing commission type houses for people on very low incomes or people that may have some sort of disadvantage, disability, mental health, all sorts of problems. And being in a government-funded or government-supported house is by far the best option, not only for them but for the entire community. Now, for a long time, the housing stock hasn't kept up, and the waiting list since the Liberals have been in government has blown out. Now I think it's up over 5,000 people, and we're talking about people who are in serious need of housing, just simply not being able to get it. So the wait times are blowing out as well. So even the people in the highest categories are waiting well over a year to be placed in a government-supported house, and it's just causing all sorts of problems. And the main reason why is because, yes, housing stock was sold off. We've had new housing providers come in, not-for-profits, but the number of houses just hasn't kept up.
So now we've talked about what the issue is. Do you have any ideas of what the solutions might actually be or what we can start doing to work our way forward?
I think the solution is supply. So we just need more houses on the ground. More houses being built is absolutely where the problem is. So if you are a young person and you want to leave home, where do you go? You've got to stay with mum and dad or whoever you're living with. Either that or you've got to move away. And we've even heard examples of like engineers, for example, who've come to work with local firms. It's taken the local firm about a year to recruit an engineer from the mainland. They've moved down with the thought of giving themselves 3 months maybe to find a house so that they can bring the rest of the family down and then roll out on this much needed job for however long, years. And those people have turned around because there's literally nowhere for them to live and bring their families. They just simply cannot find a rental. This is a very big problem for our state. So it's a big problem for people at the social housing end. It's a problem for young people because they can't find an affordable way to set themselves up with their families. And it's also a problem even at the top end because people can't come here and find a rental. And supply is the issue. So then that was definitely my focus during the last election, was trying to come up with a way anyway to improve supply. But when we hear a lot of politicians talk about this. What we see, especially from people like the Greens, and indeed some of the people who represent those who are struggling to get housing, they want intervention in the market. So in other words, they want some sort of regulation to fix the problem. So the Greens will talk about things like a tax on Airbnbs. Now, they're arguing that Airbnbs have come in and every single Airbnb that is in the market is a rental that's not being rented. Therefore, what you should do is you should ban Airbnbs or drastically reduce the number somehow, and that'll solve the problem. The only problem with that is that's not actually going to solve the problem. A lot of the Airbnbs have been people's shacks. A lot of the Airbnbs have been investors actually coming in and buying a house and turning it into an Airbnb, but it's also provided beds for tourists, and our tourism industry has become quite reliant on Airbnbs as well. But the issue is that even if you got rid of all the Airbnbs, it still wouldn't solve the problem.
There was this big news article going around the other day, obviously, about the spare room tax and that kind of stuff. Where do you sit on the spare bedroom tax?
So this is, I suppose, when the Greens and some of the independents talk about this, so they say, okay, ban Airbnbs. And my response is that doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to rent those properties out, because they do have a choice. Now, there's a number of reasons why a house might sit empty. It might be because somebody's going into a home, or they're in hospital for a long period of time, or the owner of the house has actually died and you're waiting for probate. There's all sorts of reasons. It could be renovations due and the like. So if the Greens got their way and you didn't rent your house and you were taxed because you didn't rent your house, you could actually have perverse outcomes. So outcomes that would be unfair. So imagine if your grandmother suddenly got hit with a big Greens vacancy tax simply because they're in a home and you can't sell the property. Could be for a heap of different reasons. It could be because they are actually not in a mental state of mind to be able to sign the forms, or it might be that there's a dispute amongst the family, or there could be a whole bunch of reasons why you couldn't rent that house out to somebody. So I think that what you get is this constant, you have to keep. So if you ban Airbnbs and people have their houses empty, then you need to tax the empty houses, and then you need to, you constantly just stacking regulation on top of a problem to try and fix it. You end up actually catching people out who you completely didn't target, and you can get these perverse outcomes, as they say. So somebody gets hit, which you weren't actually designing. You weren't designing a system to hit them, but they get hit anyway. But the real solution is supply. How do we get more supply? And that was where my focus was. So there's a whole bunch of issues here. So we've got a planning system that can take a long time to get things done. We've got property developments are actually quite risky. It's really hard to get areas rezoned. All these problems mean it's quite difficult to do development. And also in the cities, it's quite hard to get the density that you like. So the density that actually makes things affordable. So on most of the Northwest Coast, you can barely go over 3 stories. Whereas if you could go to 5 stories, an apartment block of 5 stories is a much better return to the developer than an apartment block of 3 stories. We're starting to see these sorts of things change, but when we think about density here on the Northwest Coast, we think about probably sticking 3 units where there used to be one house. Whereas you could get a lot more people living in a smaller area, which means that you don't have to redo all the power lines, redo all the sewerage. What we see at the moment is when we develop new land in Tasmania, it's basically spreading out and out and out and out and out, which means you need new roads. You need new power lines, you need new sewage system, you need new stormwater, and then you need a new school, and then you need a new and so on and so on. Whereas if we could get more people living in the same footprint, then that would actually be we'd actually be able to do things quicker, hopefully, and make things more affordable. Now, not everyone wants to live in an apartment, and that's fair enough, but there are a bunch of people who do, and you've got hardly any options. And the other side of it is around getting more more subdivisions done. Now, the government, they tried a way of getting this done, which was a thing they called housing supply orders, which was supposed to speed everything up. So Huntingfield down in the south was one area. There were areas in and around places like Rokeby. And in Devonport, even just a couple of 100 metres from this office, there was a housing supply order for where there used to be the old Bowls Club before they moved out to Sprayton Country Club. But the issue is there still hasn't been a single house built on the old Bowls Club site. And indeed, all these housing supply orders that were done years ago, there's only been something like 4 houses built on them. And it just hasn't been fast enough.
So when you say housing supply order, what would be the definition of a housing supply order?
Basically, that was a piece of legislation that that basically said, this is the subdivision, here it is. And you sort of stepped aside from councils, and it was supposed to be a lot faster. But the reality is that they just haven't moved, and we're still getting to the details of why. For example, hasn't there been any houses built in Huntingfield? Well, apparently there's some threatened species there or something, and it's slowed everything up. But what that means is there were hundreds of blocks that have just been available, and not a single house built. So. But part of the problem here in Tasmania is it's actually quite risky to do developments because people can put in representations and stop it, or the council might say, oh, what have you got to do for stormwater? What have you got to do for power? And it just makes things really hard. And so when you come in as an investor and you want to do a subdivision or you want to do a housing development, you're not that guaranteed that you can get it through. And it could take years and years and years. So that is actually a massive problem because time is money.
So do you think the answer to the current housing crisis is to put in more subdivisions with more houses, or higher subdivisions, like build up instead of outwards?
I think we need to do both. Absolutely need to do both. So we need to have more people living in our inner city areas, or even in the closer to the CBDs of places like even Ulverston or Devonport, Burnie, definitely Launceston, definitely Hobart. So we need to have more density, but then we also need more subdivisions. But you get these things like early mover disadvantage, it's called. So, for example, if you want to do a new subdivision, like you want to subdivide and make 10 blocks, and there's a patch of land behind you that could be subdivided into 1,000 blocks, or I don't know, just make numbers up. But let's say you want to subdivide 10 blocks, and the immediate area could be subdivided into 100 blocks. Because you're the first one, when you put in your development application, if it needs a new substation, so the power system isn't big enough to cope with the extra houses, then guess who's got to pay for the whole upgrade of that substation? It's the person who goes first. Or if you are the one who, if the stormwater or the sewage system can't handle any more development, then the first person who goes has to pay for the lot. And this is just unfair. So what you're better off having is a system where you only pay for the upgrade. So if you are only a tenth of the increase, then you should only pay a tenth of the price. But at the moment, you've got the first person who moves has to pay for the lot, and that can absolutely make it so it's unaffordable to do a subdivision. Or even densification. So if you wanted to put up some units and they say, oh, the sewage system can't handle that, you've got to upgrade the sewage system for the whole district, really, or the whole suburb sometimes, and it's just insane. So we have to have a way of doing that. But I suppose we should probably just talk about the actual details of what I was proposing. So this wouldn't solve all the problems, but it would certainly make things bigger. So I actually developed this nice little policy for the last election. And what I decided to call it was Renew Tas. And it was actually based on a model that was put in place. It's been very successful in South Australia. And it was also the same model that redeveloped the waterfront in Newcastle. So in Newcastle, when all the steel mills shut down, there was this whole massive industrial area right along the river in Newcastle, the Hunter River. I think it's the Hunter River. A along there, and it all got levelled, and then they created this development corporation, which actually changed Newcastle into an amazing place now. So I went there to see my sister, who was in the Air Force, and she was living in Newcastle right when the steel mill shut, and it was just really, really a bad place to be. Like it had a feel of a whipped dog about it. It was, the steam had definitely gone out of Newcastle. And I went to visit my brother some, 15, 20 years later after all this development, and Newcastle is just pumping. So what this and the South Renew South Australia is a similar model. So basically, what it is you have a government developer, whereas the government and I'd call it Renew Tas would partner with industry, or indeed do projects on its own. And the idea is to de-risk development. So the Renew Tas would acquire a piece of land, whether that be government land or actually go out into the market and buy it. Would do all the it would have planning powers. It would be able to do rezonings. It would be able to sort out all the issues around sewage, stormwater, power, and everything like that, so that the site, if it was say in a city, the site would be ready for development, and then you could sell it back into the market. So and all the planning would basically be done. So you'd be saying, here is the building. If it's in the city, here is your building envelope. This is the area that you could fill in. Now you develop it, and then the developer's risk is very, very low. They can just come in and then build because they know exactly what they can do. The same with a subdivision. So the government would take over something like Huntingfield and actually get it fully ready and then sell it back into the market. So talking about supply being an issue, so imagine if Renew Tas did, let's say, did a subdivision on the outskirts of Latrobe. 100-lot subdivision, does all the planning work, does all the water and sewerage, and then releases it back into the market. Also, part of the idea would be there'd be a percentage of those blocks which the government would retain and build houses for social housing, spread out amongst that development. So not just in the one corner, but sort of spread out. And then a portion of those blocks would also be made available to people like first home buyers, so that they could build houses at the affordable end, and then the rest would be basically put out into the market for builders to take on, or people, whoever wanted to build a house could buy those blocks and build a house.
So would that be that Renew Tas actually builds houses on that land themselves as well, or are they just a developer to make the blocks ready to build on?
They would be, in that particular instance, they would be the developer to get the blocks ready. And then, so we've got Homes Tas, who the government created, their job would be, if they were actually really cracking on instead of slowing everything down, then the Homes Tas would come in and build those social and affordable, the social end. And then but we'd be trying to put incentives in place so first home buyers would come in as well and build a house. Now, part of the issue here as well is around land banking. So what could happen is that a wealthy individual or a company or whatever could come in and buy up a whole heap of blocks and then just sit on them. And that's one way to make money. Okay, fair enough. That's one way to make money. They can come in, sit on the blocks, watch houses get built, and then come in and sell blocks at a much higher price later on when it's not an empty field. So I think but that's not what we really want as a policy outcome. We want houses to be built, so we'd have to put in place some sort of caveat, some sort of mechanism to stop people land banking. Now, what I would think is it would be something around putting on the title what you call a substantial commencement clause in the contract, that if you haven't started building a house, so for example, during COVID, it was you had to have your slab down. You have to have a slab built within 2 or 3 years unless there's a really good reason why. And that would stop people land banking. Basically, we want supply, so we want houses built as quickly as possible. So the incentives have to be around building the house on each of those blocks rather than somebody coming in and just sitting on the blocks waiting for them to gain value and then make money by in effect just clipping the ticket and banking the profits.
So
But
you said this was your idea.
Mm.
Where does it sit now, and like how come it was and not is? Like what's got in the way of that?
Well, it definitely would have been our policy, and we would have been rolling it out. So hopefully, if I was minister, instead of being in opposition, that I'd be, up to my neck trying to roll this out. Whereas being in opposition is very frustrating because we pitched this at the election. We spent probably maybe 3 or 4 days talking about this as a policy right at the start of the election, and then it just got swamped out by everything else, especially the stadium. So. This is the whole thing about election campaigns. Obviously, the election came around quicker than what we expected, so we hadn't had time to really tell everybody about it. Although I can tell you for a fact that the industry was definitely supportive. The housing providers were supportive. We had a lot of support for this policy, but it gets lost in the mix. So when you've got an election campaign and there's so much happening. Because this is actually a detailed policy, it takes a little bit to explain. It's not just a one-liner, like we're going to create a Tasmanian insurer. This actually takes a bit of explaining, and it just got lost.
So is it just dead in the water now, or what's the future with the policy, and what is has the current government put in like an alternative, or what's the issue?
Well, I don't think the Liberals have shown any interest in this at all. It's something that I've definitely keep developing. So if anybody's got any feedback out there, drop us an email or a message or something like that. I'd be more than happy to talk you through the policy and maybe where it can be improved. Absolutely.
Is that policy available anywhere online that we can get and view, or is it just email only kind of thing?
Oh, I think probably the best thing to do would be to contact me or my office and do it that way. There is detail behind it. Like for example, I think if we were doing developments in the city, then Renew Tas could actually partner with a developer and take some equity in that development, like that, and that's what Renew South Australia does. And in fact, going back to Renew South Australia, they actually make money. They've got this government developer who actually makes money, and then that money is reinvested into the next project. So if you look at the election promise, we said that we give the Renew Tas a $20 million equity injection to get it going. Probably needs more than that, to be honest. But anyway, you're in an election campaign and you need to cost everything. But that $20 million would have meant that Renew Tas would have started off relatively small, which is probably not a bad thing. So do 1 or 2 developments, and then the idea then is for them Renew Tas by being able to develop, by being able to get equity from things like rezoning. Or selling a development-ready site, then that money would be reinvested into the next project. And the aim would be over time that Renew Tas grew itself. And in South Australia, the Renew South Australia is actually making money. So it's actually possible to deliver that money back to the budget, which I wouldn't think would be such a good thing. It would be better if the money that the Renew Tas would be reinvested into the next project and the next project and the next project. So that way we can start getting more and more houses developed, so that we can increase our population, so that we can give people jobs, and we can get people housed. I think it's a big win-win-win. But you've got to be in government to deliver this sort of thing. And if you've got a government who are pretending that they're fixing the housing situation and they're not, then it gets very, very frustrating. So when the woman who's just about to be homeless and sleeping in her car with her kids comes into my office and talks about being desperate and there being no housing options, there's not a lot I can do. Whereas if we were actually building houses as a government and massively increasing the number of houses in the state, then I'd be in a much better position to help.
So if this is such a good idea, how come the government hasn't kind of adapted it or put out like a counter offer like that they can do themselves?
Because then they'd have to admit they weren't doing the job. This is the whole thing, is the government, what they've decided to do is say they're going to build 10,000 new houses by 2032. Now, and they're claiming that they've already built 4,000, which is a complete lie. It is a complete lie. They are counting everything that they can find. They count vacant blocks. So like Huntingfield, for example, all the vacant blocks, they're counted as a house in their system. So each vacant block is a house. A bed in a hostel is counted the same as a house, and that's the way they've got up to their 4,000. And they're just not fixing the problem. So one of the reasons why they probably wouldn't do something like Renew Tasmania is because first of all, they'd have to actually admit that they weren't doing enough. All you have to do is look at the stats. So we've got well over 5,000 people on the housing wait list. And each of those people, by the way, could be a family, not just one individual, could be a whole family. So there's well over 5,000, and the wait time has blown out to a couple of years. So if you're on the housing wait list, even if you are absolutely desperate for a house, the average wait time, even for the highest category, is over a year. It wasn't like this 11 years ago. That's the thing. Things are far, far worse. So if the government want to actually adopt a policy like this, the first thing they have to do is admit they're not doing enough already.
You're going to hit pause.
Yeah, so sorry about that. Like obviously the phone was ringing, and believe it or not, it was another housing issue. Anyway, so getting back to, like, when you talk about a policy like this, it's quite hard for people to get their head around what it could actually do. So what could Renew Tas do? So I've talked a little bit about those affordable house and land package type of idea with a big subdivision. So get a piece of land, develop it, get it ready to go. Part of it would be that social and affordable, these sort of cheaper house and land packages for first home buyers, those sorts of things. But also it could actually do bigger developments. One of the things we talked about during the election campaign was, I think we've got this massive opportunity in some of our towns and cities in Tasmania that are probably just sitting there waiting to happen, but it's just all too hard. It's all too risky. So one thing you could be, when I go to Burnie, now I've had I did put a post up 6 months ago about the empty shops in Burnie, and some people had a bit of a crack. But I think that Burnie is absolutely ripe for development. There is a huge opportunity there. And I look along the waterfront and just think about what that could actually be. So just imagine if you had a government developer like Renew Tas who could partner with the owners of all the land along the waterfront, or buy the land off some of the owners and basically redevelop it all from one end to the other, from Bayviews to all the way to the port, really. You could do something amazing there. You could have like outside dining. You could have, because the railway line's going to go too. So you have this huge opportunity. You could have sort of shops and restaurants and everything on the bottom level. You could have businesses on another level, and then you could have accommodation above that. That might be apartments. It might be hotels. It could be anything. And we've seen areas like this get redeveloped. I've talked about along the river in Newcastle, but also you think about South Bank in Melbourne, Mooloolaba. Like, there's been a number of these types of developments, but they're very hard. And why are they hard? Well, there's a lot of landowners. There is a lot of risk is probably the biggest thing. It is risk. What happens if we could reduce the risk and we could partner with the current landowners, the ones who didn't want to participate? We could try and buy the land off them, and then everybody could benefit. The whole community could be lifted by a development like that. It could change the face of Burnie, and we could do the same in other areas like the rail corridor in Hobart, or even the waterfront. There's a huge opportunity in East Devonport along the river. There's a huge opportunity in the other side of Devonport along the river. One of the things about being Tasmanian is quite often we can't see the opportunity But someone else comes in and go from the mainland or from overseas, and they look at what we've got and they go, "Oh my God, this could be so good." But it's just really hard to get projects of that scale up in Tasmania because everything is just too hard. Because our system is not designed, to be honest, for getting developments like that up, and I think that's part of the reason why our state is held back. So if we had an organisation who could de-risk large-scale developments like that, we could actually have a massive building boom in some of our towns and cities that could really do with a building boom right now.
So touching on that phone call that we just got, obviously, we've had 2 phone calls and an email today just on housing. Surely the current sitting government would be getting them as well. How come none of this of what you're suggesting has been done or seen in any form really?
Yeah, well, I think that it's not a priority for the Liberals. I think that has to be, and they, like I've said before, they're pretending that they're fixing the problem when they're absolutely not. They're pretending they're fixing the problem by some really dodgy accounting, rather than actually getting people off the street, getting people in desperate situations into houses, or creating even creating opportunities for young Tasmanians who simply want to leave home or start a family or partner up. Like if one of your kids at home, is about 20 and meets the man or woman of their dreams and they want to move in together, what options have they got? Like, it's really hard for anybody to get a rental. It's even harder to get an affordable rental. So, quite often what we're seeing is these young people, the decision they're actually making is to leave. Um, we don't want that. We want opportunity here. But we've got a government who are just pretending that they're fixing the problem by saying, "Oh, we've already built 4,000 houses," when they absolutely haven't. And like I've said, the first thing that they've got to do is admit there's a problem, and they just won't.
So do you think that'll ever happen? Because obviously when you got off the phone just before, I could physically see that you were upset about the conversation you just had. So for the next 3 years, do you think something's going to change, or what can we do to help improve people's
Well,
positions?
I mean, absolutely, we just have to keep holding the government to account, trying to make them feel bad. And the way that we can do that is by raising people's issues in the parliament itself. Like when we can ask questions in question time, we can put motions up. And also when people come into the office here, we go into bat for them. And every now and then we have a success story. Every now and then, the ducks line up and we can get somebody into a house. But a lot of the times, all we can do is try and write a letter to the minister and raise the attention of that particular issue and hope for the best. And I don't really want to hope for the best. I want to be working on a plan that could actually deliver a housing solution rather than hope is not a plan. I'd much rather be working on the plan than just hoping the government are going to do something about helping the person who's just walked into the office. So it's very, very frustrating. It's really frustrating. It's the thing that probably gets to me the most is this situation when you see the look in people's eyes when they are desperate and there's very little we can do about it. And when you see that, week after week, it can be a bit of a grind. And that's probably one of the hardest things about being in opposition is when you see these problems and a government that's not really fixing them.
So they're coming in here, and you're kind of like their last hope. Like you're their last light at the end of the tunnel. What would be the short term fix, and what would be the long term fix?
Well, I mean, I think obviously we need more emergency accommodation too. So that's an immediate fix. I've talked about this in the parliament in the past as well. Like when you're talking at the real pointy end of housing and homelessness especially, there's a short, a medium and a long-term problem. I mean, the short-term problem is people need houses today. Women's shelters, we talked about it during the election campaign. Women fleeing family violence, there's like 4 beds in the whole Northwest Coast. And it's just not good enough. They need probably 20, 25. So there's an investment that needs to happen right now. Even if you get people off the street by, putting them in dongers or something, that is a short-term solution, is organising 20 dongers to put on a property so that you can get people off the street today. And then the medium-term problem is actually having a house for them to move into. And then the long-term problem is making it sustainable so that it keeps going, that we keep building the houses that Tasmanians need, that we can have like a planning scheme that makes it easier to build houses, or a planning scheme that allows us to have more density in our inner urban areas. So those are the long-term problems. But even if the government just bought 20 dongers and put them on a block here in Devonport, we could get people off the street. And those people who were basically out of options could at least have something to get them off the street so they're not sleeping in their car with their kids.
Well, they were sending them to caravan parks, weren't they? But obviously the caravan parks are getting full as well. With all politics put aside, personally, can you see the government doing anything in the near future to battle that?
I've just seen no evidence, because all they keep doing is repeating that they've built 4,000 out of their 10,000 goal, and it's complete nonsense. It's just nonsense. And then we go into estimates and we pull the whole thing apart, and then they just keep repeating it. We've got our goal of 10,000 houses by 2032, and we're almost halfway there. Yeah, it's just nonsense, and that's what we're battling. And the real
So
impact
going
of that.
forward, like the people at home, what would be the solution now that they can do? Do you think, like, do they ring up you guys more, or what's the solution?
Well, obviously, it's to contact the housing providers. It's to get yourself on the list. It's to try and take a rental wherever you can get it. Um, we can raise it as an issue. Every now and then we get lucky, but I think to solve the problem, we just need more houses. That is just simply it. We just need to find a way to build more houses.
All right, I think you pretty much summed up how passionate you are about it. Do you have any like exiting thoughts or comments?
Well, I mean, especially about my Renew Tas idea. So, a government developer, if anybody's got any ideas out there, so if you're a builder or you're a planner or you're, a community member that thinks I've got it wrong, or that I should be doing something else, or that these are the ways we can tweak the idea, then just let me know. Let's have the conversation. Hopefully, part of these podcasts is actually to get people thinking about things. It might not be the perfect solution. If you've got a better idea, let's talk about it.